The KV-1 was one of the most famous Soviet heavy tanks of the Second World War, a machine that left a lasting mark on both history and tank development. It was designed in the late 1930s when the Soviet Union was searching for a tank that could withstand the firepower of contemporary anti-tank weapons and provide unmatched protection for its crews. The KV-1 was named after Kliment Voroshilov, a prominent Soviet political and military leader, and it first appeared during the Winter War against Finland in 1939. Its debut showed both its strengths and its weaknesses, but it quickly became one of the most powerful tanks of its time. At the heart of the KV-1's success was its armor. In an era when most tanks had thin plating that could be penetrated by common anti-tank guns, the KV-1 stood out with its thick armor that could reach up to 90 mm in later versions. This made it practically invulnerable to many German weapons during the early stages of Operation Barbarossa in 1941. German soldiers were shocked to encounter a tank that their standard 37 mm and even 50 mm anti-tank guns could not penetrate. Stories spread of German shells bouncing off the KV-1's armor, creating fear and respect for this Soviet giant. In some cases, the Germans had to use heavy artillery or the famous 88 mm flat guns to deal with it. The KV-1 was not just about armor. It carried a 76.2 mm gun, which was strong enough to destroy most German tanks of the early war period, including the Panzer III and Panzer IV. The tank also had multiple machine guns, providing protection against infantry. Its heavy weight, however, was both a strength and a weakness. The tank could dominate in direct combat, but its size and bulk often made it slow and difficult to maneuver, especially on muddy or snowy terrain, which were common conditions on the Eastern Front. Mechanical breakdowns were another problem, as the tank's transmission and suspension systems were under great strain from the weight of the thick armor. Despite these flaws, the KV-1 played a crucial role in slowing down the German advance in 1941. At a time when the Soviet Union was unprepared for the speed and power of the German blitzkrieg, the KV-1 became a symbol of resistance. One famous story tells of a single KV-1 that held up a German division for hours, destroying numerous vehicles before finally being overwhelmed. These stories highlighted the resilience and importance of the tank, even though it could not stop the Germans entirely. The morale boost it provided to Soviet soldiers was significant, as it showed that their equipment could match or even surpass that of the enemy. Production of the KV-1 continued throughout the early years of the war, and several variants were created. Some had thicker armor, while others featured modifications to the gun or equipment to improve performance. The Soviets also experimented with lighter versions to address mobility issues, but the main idea behind the KV-1 remained the same: to create a tank that could survive enemy fire and dominate the battlefield. However, as the war went on, new German tanks like the Tiger and Panther appeared, and the KV-1 began to lose its edge. These German machines had stronger guns and better armor, making the once fearsome KV-1 less effective. By 1943, the Soviets started shifting their focus to newer designs such as the KV-85 and eventually the IS series of heavy tanks, which offered greater firepower to deal with German advancements. Still, the KV-1 had already earned its place in history. Over 5,000 units were produced, and many of them fought in the toughest battles of the Eastern Front. They were used not only in major operations like the defense of Moscow, Leningrad, and Stalingrad but also in countless smaller engagements where their sheer presence could tip the balance. The KV-1 was more than just a machine, it was also a symbol of Soviet industrial power. Building such a large and heavily armored tank was not easy, especially during wartime conditions when factories were under constant threat of bombing and resources were scarce. Yet the Soviet Union managed to produce thousands of KV-1s, showing its determination to resist the German invasion. For the crews, serving in a KV-1 was both a privilege and a challenge. They enjoyed the security provided by its armor but also had to endure the hardships of operating a heavy and sometimes unreliable vehicle.